What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the... What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the historical... What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about cowboys in the American West, which you can use to create a historically accurate cowboy character in Red Dead Online. Let's get started. The first cowboys were called Vaqueros, Spanish for cowman, originating in the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. In 1493, Columbus brought the first cattle to the New World, specifically to the island of Hispaniola, today's Haiti and Dominican Republic. In time, the imported cattle reproduced rapidly in the Caribbean, and by 1512, importation of cattle by ship from Europe was no longer necessary. Caribbean cattle were introduced into Mexico in 1521 and had been moved north in what is now Texas and south into Colombia and Venezuela within a few decades. It was in these areas that modern cowboy culture extensively developed. By the late 1800s, the time frame of Red Dead Online, cattle drives had proved extremely profitable. One head of cattle raised in Texas was worth about $4, but back east, that same head of cattle was worth $40. This is where cowboys, cattle drives, and railroads came in. Cowboys drove the cattle north to railheads such as Abilene, Kansas City, Dodge City, Wichita, Denver, and others, where they were loaded onto rail cars and shipped to be slaughtered in Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Then the beef was shipped again to the bustling cities of the East. Such a boom greatly expanded the cattle business in the West, leading to big ranches, cattle tycoons, and an immense demand for cowboys to carry it all out. Hence, why many folks deem this period as the golden age of the American cowboy. In the New World, most of the early cattle ranchers were ethnically Spanish, and most of the vaquero workers were mestizos, a mix of white and indigenous bloodlines. As cowboy culture spread, cowboys became more diverse. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that this diversity fluctuated greatly by region. By the late 1800s, while the largest component of cowboys in the American West were white, estimates placed the number of cowboys of Mexican descent in the American West at around 30%. African Americans accounted for around 20%. While we don't have any accurate figures for the number of cowboys of Native American descent, we know from numerous sources that there were many. Suffice it to say, cowboys in the late 1800s were a very diverse group. On that note, it's also important to mention that while there are only limited records on the subject, some women did participate in cattle drives and did ranch work. Again, this would have been exceptionally rare, but it did happen. The American novelist and Pulitzer Prize winner Hamlin Garland described the cowboy of the late 1800s as follows. Quote, "He's a good rider, and long experience has made him acquainted with all the wonderful evolutions and ramifications of the buck and bronco. He can throw a lasso with unerring aim, is in the saddle 12 hours a day, and is as much of a gentleman as any other man, considering the lack of opportunity to acquire what the world calls polish, and no more so. He is neither saint nor sinner, a jovial, light-hearted, hard-working young fellow who minds his own business, but who will not be imposed upon. Morally, as a class, they are foul-mouthed, blasphemous, drunken, lecherous, utterly corrupt. Usually harmless on the plains when sober, they are dreaded in towns, but then liquor has the ascendancy over them." In his 1882 book, The Annals of Kansas, author D.W. Wilder supports Garland's description of drunken cowboys, writing, quote, "When he feels well, and he always does when he's full of what he calls Kansas sheep dip, the average cowboy is a bad man to handle. Armed to the teeth, well-mounted, and full of their favorite beverage, the cowboys will dash through the principal streets of the town yelling like Comanches." I suppose this should be somewhat expected though, as driving cattle was monotonous, boring work, which would often take between 2 and 3 months. Additionally, there was no drinking, gambling, or brawling allowed on the trail. As such, when these young men arrived at the railhead and were paid months of accumulated wages in one lump sum, they were ready to let loose. Should be of no surprise then that some of the most famous lawmen of the West got their start keeping order in the rowdy cowtowns of Kansas, among them Wyatt Earp, Wild Bill Hickok, and Bat Masterson. Alright, enough background, let's get into the clothing. In the southern regions of the West, cowboys primarily wore wide-brimmed Stetsons, customized by their owners and full of patina and personality. We see examples in photos of famous cowboys like Nat Love and outlaws like John Wesley Hardin and Billy the Kid. These hats tended to be very functional, having wider brims to protect wearers from the sun and taller crowns to keep heads cool. High-crowned hats were also useful in fanning the flames of a campfire, carrying water, or serving as a feed bag for the owner's horse. As for customization, the fronts of brims were sometimes upturned or or curled up so they didn't blow down and slap wearers in the face in windy conditions. Upturned brims also provided a better field of vision. Sometimes brims were curled up on the sides to stay out of the way when lassoing, or just on one side to facilitate aiming down a rifle. Some cowboys left their crowns round, while others pinched them to make their hats easier to adjust. So suffice it to say, each man customized them as needed, which explains the variety seen in old photos. On the northern plains, southern-style hats tended to get blown off the heads of cowboys much easier due to the strong winds of the northern ranges. As such, these northern cowboys typically wore hats with narrower brims but slightly taller crowns. Knowing this, an observer with a keen eye could guess fairly accurately which area of the country another cowboy was from, again, just by looking at the size and shape of a man's hat. Regardless of the range a cowboy was on, when it came to hat color, the typical cowboy of the late 1800s wore a white, tan, or other light-colored hat. Dark hats were simply far too hot in the scorching western sun. If you're looking to make a cowboy that resides on the northern ranges like Wyoming or Montana, the most historically accurate options in Red Dead Online are the Cayuga hat, Liberty hat, the Caldwell hat, and the Purkis hat. If you're making a cowboy that resides on the southern ranges like Texas, you'll want the Stalker hat, the Military Scout hat, the Military Slouch hat, the Cutter hat, or the Tilthman hat. A couple hats fall right between the two styles, so if you're looking for something flexible, try the Kennedy hat or the Plantation hat. Cowboys wore pullover cotton or flannel shirts of a variety of colors and patterns, which they would button up to the neck. Cotton bib shirts were also popular amongst cowboys in 1898. Since the scarcity of water made bathing and washing of clothes a luxury, the practical bib could easily be removed and cleaned, or just flipped over to hide any stains until the next opportunity to wash came. As for colors, most were solid white, gray, or navy, but other colors and striped patterns were reasonably common, so you really can't go too wrong here. The most historically accurate cowboy shirts in Red Dead Online include the bib shirt, collar overshirt, and the everyday overshirt. The frontier shirt, which I wear for most of this video, is 100% historically accurate, but it seems to have been a limited stock item. Now, pants pockets can be hard to reach when you're riding a horse, so vests became a popular clothing addition among cowboys. The pockets provided a space to stash personal items, and they also provided an extra layer of protection from the elements. Generally, cowboys wore vests with standard work shirt, but not if the cowboy was wearing a bib shirt. As for colors, cowboys kept their vests dark, usually navy, gray, brown, or black. In Red Dead Online, there aren't many historically accurate cowboy vests. In fact, there aren't any. The Lancer vest is the correct cut, but it should be made of cotton, not leather. The traditional vest is of the correct material, cotton, but it's missing the collar, and the back shouldn't be silk. That said, these are your only two real options. So rock one of these or scrap the vest altogether, waiting for Rockstar to put out something that's actually accurate. Cowboy pants were often made of heavy wool due to its durability, with striped, checkered, or plaid designs. Solid tan or gray were also popular. Additionally, cowboy pants often had an additional layer of fabric or buckskin to reinforce the seat. And for those of you wondering, jeans didn't become popular among cowboys until the 1920s. In Red Dead Online, there are several pants that are accurate for the time. These include the sacket pants, studded pants, padded saddle work pants, clerk pants, slack pants, or the cufftown pants. Despite what you've seen in old Western movies, bat-wing chaps weren't commonly worn until the 1920s. So, if you want to be historically accurate, do yourself a favor and pass on them. In the late 1800s, cowboy chaps differed between the northern and southern plains. Cowboys in the northern ranges like Montana wore woolies, sheepskin chaps with the wool still attached on the outside. On the southern ranges, cowboys wore narrow leg leather chaps that were stitched the entire length like a pair of pants. These were called shotgun chaps because the two legs looked like the double barrels of a shotgun. They're also called stovepipe chaps because, well, they look like a couple stovepipes. If you're going for a northern range cowboy, pick up the Griffith chaps or the Heathland chaps in white or black. Making a southern ranger, get the Alvarado chaps in a shade of brown or black. Now, I dove pretty deep into cowboy boots in my Red Dead Online clothing video, so if you're really interested in knowing why they were designed the way they were, be sure to check that out. Now that said, most cowboy boots in the 1898 Sears catalog had minimal embellishments, while numerous for sale in the Wheeler and Rawson catalog have ornately embossed designs, fringe, tassels, and stitching. But this doesn't mean that they're historically inaccurate, as most cowboys had their boots custom made and likely sported a variety of these personal touches. In fact, the stitching on the boot even served the practical purpose of stiffening the leather so the boot better held its shape. The bandana was a useful accessory, especially for cowboys on drives. Bandanas could be tied over a cowboy's head to keep his hat in place during heavy winds, worn over the nose and mouth to protect from the dust kicked up by a herd of cattle, tied over the ears in cold weather, used as the blindfold for a horse, a sweat rag, a towel, a pot holder, a sling, a tourniquet, and a bandage. It could tie up a calf's feet and even hobble a horse. If you're designing a historically accurate cowboy character, you'll need one. In the late 1800s, most came in one of three colors: red, blue, or black. Most cowboys and most men of the American West as a whole were either clean-shaven or sported a mustache. While it's possible some grew beards for the annual fall cattle drive, most kept their whiskers tidy or off their faces altogether. Now that you folks know the intricacies of how cowboys dressed in the late 1800s, you can look at photos from the time period and just with a glance have a pretty good guess of where that cowboy came from. Let's try it. Woolly chaps, narrow brim, tall crown. This is a Northern Range cowboy. Shotgun chaps, wide brim, lower crown. This is a Southern Range cowboy. Definitely a Southern Range cowboy. Southern, Northern, Northern, Southern. Pretty easy once you know what you're looking for. Now some of you cowboys may have more lofty visions of yourself and read it online. Enter the cattle baron. In the late 1800s, this man might be best exemplified by the notorious Texas rancher Charles Goodnight, a certifiable badass that was a Comanche fighting Texas Ranger turned cattle baron. Not only did Goodnight blaze the Goodnight loving cattle trail to the more northern railheads, but he also invented the chuck wagon, may have single-handedly saved the American bison from extinction, and was the first to crossbreed bison and cattle, which he called catalo. Even at the age of 91, Goodnight was crushing it, marrying a 26-year-old woman who was young enough to be his great-granddaughter. Now that last bit might not have anything to do with him being a cattle baron, but mad respect. If you're thinking this guy should have a movie made about him, he already does. It's a 4-part miniseries based on a Pulitzer Prize winning book called Lonesome Dove, and it's one of the best westerns ever made. The series won several awards and has sold more DVDs than any western movie in American history. The story is a fictionalized account based on the real lives of Charles Goodnight's and Oliver Loving's cattle drive from Texas to Montana. If you haven't watched it, I definitely recommend you check it out. Now, if you want to create a Charles Goodnight character, it's pretty straightforward. You'll just need to put together a black or dark gray suit, matching vest, a white shirt, and a black tie. I recommend the ascot or the folding string tie. Add a beard, and you're well on your way to having yourself a good night. Thank you folks for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, as you guys know, this channel is not monetized, so if you do enjoy these videos, you want to support my efforts, please consider visiting the Man vs. History Outfitter shop, where you guys can get all your gear for the modern frontier and support the channel in the process. Another way to support this channel is by becoming a Patreon patron, where you guys get a hefty discount in the shop and a whole bunch of other perks. You'll find those links for both those things down in the description. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you folks soon. Also, before I go, I can't forget my Patreon patrons. Thank you, folks. You guys make all this possible. So special thanks to my gold tier patrons, Tyler Bioshock Rodriguez, Chasing Victory, Ashley Gertensen, Teddy Bad Boy, The Innocents, Drake Pliskin, Hurtin Wade, Comrade Krieger, Man vs. Moose, Dawson E, Bryce V, Zonk Breezes, Cyber, Noah Ovens, and Rich Christensen. Thank you guys. Also want to make sure that I thank my bronze and silver tier Patreon patrons. Again, without your guys' support, we wouldn't have a channel. So thank you for everything. Let's keep growing. Let's keep building. We'll see you guys soon.